about systemic racism, and most times
has it gotten worse since 1960?
Yes, actually.
Systemic racism has gotten worse since Jim Crow.
Yes. So you want me to give you a stat? Black home ownership today is less than it was pre-Fair Housing Act of 1968.
Bill Maher and Ben Shapiro just silenced Bakari Sellers after dumb comparison about racism. In a fiery exchange that has the internet buzzing, Ben Shapiro recently clashed with former South Carolina State Representative Bakari Sellers on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, debating the issue of systemic racism and its impact on Black Americans. The discussion took an unexpected turn when Sellers made a comparison that left many viewers questioning the validity of his arguments. Bill Maher and Ben Shapiro joined forces against Bakari Sellers on the 13th of July episode of Real Time on HBO after Bakari Sellers argued that race relations in 2024 are worse than they were in 1954. Shapiro inquired Sellers, "Systemic racism has gotten worse than Jim Crow?" Sellers responded firmly with a yes to Shapiro's question, pointing out that Black homeownership today is actually lower than it was before the Fair Housing Act of 1968. He highlighted this as a significant indicator of persistent inequality, arguing that despite legislative progress, systemic barriers continue to undermine economic opportunities for Black Americans. Following Sellers' statement that he, his family, and numerous others had encountered systemic racism, Shapiro asked him if he believed that Black Americans in general were treated worse now than they were in 1960. Bakari Sellers answered, "A lot of times when we talk about racism, we only talk about the fact when somebody calls you nigger, but very rarely do we talk about the systems of injustice and oppression we have in this country. Where I'm from, Denmark, South Carolina, you don't have clean water, right? I lived in a food desert. I grew up in a food desert where you can't go a mile or two and have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. The schools are falling apart. The infrastructure is eroding." Ben Shapiro then posed a thought-provoking question to Bakari Sellers, asking, "Bakari, is your life as a Black man better or worse than it would have been if you had been born in 1920 in the United States?" Shapiro's question wasn't just rhetorical, it was a strategic move to illustrate how historical context is crucial in understanding systemic racism. African Americans faced widespread discrimination, disenfranchisement, and extreme racial segregation during the 1920s. Tragically, killings and acts of violence driven by race were commonplace, and the civil rights we take for granted today were only pipe fantasies. Sellers replied, "All you have to do is ask my father, who literally was shot in the Orangeburg massacre. He will tell you today that he feels like this country's in 1954. From here onward, Bill Maher also entered the debate and sided with Ben Shapiro. He cut off Sellers and said, "That doesn't mean it is. You said he feels that way. That's ridiculous. It is." Sellers criticized both Maher and Shapiro, arguing that neither truly understood the experiences of Black Americans. He suggested that their perspectives lacked authenticity due to their backgrounds. Maher responded firmly, questioning the notion that he couldn't discuss racial issues just because he isn't part of the Black community. He emphasized that he is a thoughtful person capable of understanding and discussing these topics. Maher also pointed out that personal bias might be affecting Sellers' ability to see the issue from different angles. This exchange raised important questions about who can contribute to conversations about race and whether personal experience is the only valid perspective. Bill Maher then said, "You're right, there's two ways you can not understand something. One is to be too far from it. We're too far from it. We can't see like you can. One is to be too close to something, and then sometimes you can't see it accurately either." The conversation grew tense when Sellers accused Maher of dismissing his father's experiences with racism. Sellers emphasized the struggles his father faced, highlighting the deep-rooted nature of racial issues in America. Maher quickly responded, clarifying that he wasn't dismissing or belittling those experiences. He stressed that acknowledging the progress society has made doesn't undermine the challenges faced by previous generations. Shapiro joined the conversation, arguing that Sellers couldn't use his father's experiences as definitive proof of ongoing oppression because they had grown up in different eras of American history. He pointed out that while the struggles of the past were real and severe, today's landscape is different.
Bakari, is your life as a Black man better or worse than it would have been if you had been born in 1920 in the United States?
Well, all you have to do is ask my father, who literally was shot in the Orangeburg massacre. right, who helped found SNCC, who marched with Marion Barry and Stokely Carmichael and Martin Luther King, and the list goes on and on and on. And he will tell you today that he feels like this country's at 1954.
Shapiro suggested that it's important to recognize this evolution while still addressing the issues that remain. If I were to say to you as a Jew that the experience of Jews in the United States today is worse than the experience of Jews in Europe in 1939, I would not be stating accurately. It's not true. And it's also not true to say that the experience of black people in America in 2024 is is worse on a general level than the experience of black men, because in 1954 in Alabama, which is crazy, Sellers fired back at Shapiro's argument, accusing him of being genuinely intellectually dishonest. This accusation brought the conversation to a boiling point as tensions between the panelists continued to rise. The debate shifted to a discussion about the advancement of opportunities for black Americans over the decades. Shapiro argued that while historical challenges were undeniable, the opportunities available today are significantly better compared to the past. Sellers, however, remained firm in his belief that systemic issues continue to hinder black Americans' progress. He insisted that while there may be more opportunities, the playing field is still not level and systemic barriers persist in many areas of life. The discussion then shifted to concerns about African American female mortality rates, with Sellers describing it as a significant political issue. He highlighted the disproportionate health challenges faced by black women, arguing that these issues reflect broader systemic inequalities that need urgent attention. Did you know? I am sure you do, but black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die giving childbirth than white women. Shapiro responded by pointing out that similar disparities exist in Europe, suggesting that the problem isn't unique to the United States. He attributed these disparities to lower median household incomes among black Americans, implying that economic factors play a significant role in health outcomes. Sellers, however, challenged this assertion, arguing that the issue of African American female mortality rates transcends socioeconomic lines. He insisted that even black women in higher income brackets face similar challenges, indicating that systemic racism and implicit bias within healthcare systems contribute to these disparities. I would call bullsh asterisk T because it actually crosses across socioeconomic lines. So you can be my wife who almost died during childbirth. You can be Serena Williams who almost died during childbirth. Shapiro pressed further, questioning if white doctors are inherently racist. Sellers countered this by saying, no, but there actually is implicit bias in our healthcare delivery system, and there have been medical studies that show that people react to the pain of black women differently than they respond to the pain of white women. That literally is a fact. Bill Maher also added that he also believed this. Shapiro then argued that a range of factors, such as obesity rates during pregnancy among different communities, should be considered when discussing disparities in African American female mortality rates. He cautioned against attributing these disparities solely to implicit bias within healthcare systems. Shapiro described implicit bias as innately, insanely difficult, if not impossible to measure, suggesting that focusing exclusively on it might overlook other significant contributing factors. He also added, unless you remove the statistical confounds, you end up trying to blame vague, shadowy figures like implicit bias. Sellers expressed confusion at Shapiro's complex argument, responding with, I don't know what he just said. His reaction underscored the difficulty of following Shapiro's detailed critique, reflecting a broader challenge in navigating the intricate layers of the debate. In the end, the heated debate between Bill Maher, Ben Shapiro, and Bakari Sellers illuminated the intricate dynamics involved in discussing systemic racism and its effects on black Americans. Shapiro and Maher emphasized the historical context and the evolution of opportunities available to black Americans over time, pointing to advancements and changes since the 1960s. In contrast, Sellers focused on the persistent systemic issues and disparities that continue to affect marginalized communities today, notably within the realm of healthcare, where he cited ongoing inequalities in access and treatment. The exchange highlighted the difficulty of reconciling historical perspectives with current realities. It also illustrated the challenges of addressing multifaceted social issues from diverse viewpoints. As the conversation concluded, viewers were left to grapple with the nuances of these arguments and consider the ongoing struggles and progress in the fight for racial equality. What do you think? Did Shapiro and Maher effectively challenge Sellers' views, or did they miss the mark? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video thought-provoking, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more deep dives into the hottest debates and current issues.